talk about finding the root cause of an accident. And sometimes when an accident happens, we don't always see the real reasons why. And sometimes we think we find the answer, and sometimes we miss the mark on that. So we want to talk about things today that you can learn to look for whenever you have an accident or injury or a loss of any kind. You can look at that and find out what are the real driving reasons behind it. Sometimes all we see is the things we see on the surface. We may see the symptoms, we may see conditions, but we may not always see that real cause of the accident. So that's what we want to look at today, and I'll help guide you with some specific examples that we've seen from around the state to learn from as we go through here. So what we do is we see incident investigations from several members around the state. We see these during the TAP application reviews that we receive when they're sent in. We look at these, and a lot of times there's incident investigation forms, and the members will send in this information about incidents they've had. And we're finding some trends. We're seeing some things as we look at these, and we found some things that maybe we can learn from and improve on. But some of the things that we see are they're missing the root cause. Maybe they have the description of the accident in there. Maybe they have some corrective actions, things that they can do to improve, but they sometimes don't identify what that real cause is, and that can cause us to not find the correct solution to a problem. And so we might be missing the root cause on some of those. Some of those we're not quite getting down far enough to the root cause. They'll stop at the symptoms, or they'll stop at the identifying the operator or the name of somebody or a condition, but they don't usually get to that root cause. And sometimes they identify root cause, but it might be the wrong one. And so we want to make sure that we're hitting our target, that we're hitting the mark, that we're getting to the root cause that we can learn and improve from. So what is a root cause? We can talk about this now. It's really the main reason why an accident happens. Okay, so we can look at this. It's also known as an underlying cause of an accident. So we may see certain things in the workplace that lead to an accident. We may see conditions. We may see procedures or management involvement. We may see things like that. But sometimes if we don't ask the right questions, we don't find that real underlying cause of why it happened. So we want to learn to look at that. It's also known as an initiating cause of an accident. So if you look at these dominoes in the picture here, consider that red one. That red domino is that initiating cause of what causes the rest of those dominoes to fall. And when we're doing accident investigations, sometimes asking those questions is not quite getting back to that red domino. It's stopping part way, and you're not getting that real picture, that real understanding of why an accident happened. So that's why it's important to make sure we're doing that and following through to get to the root cause. But why do we need to find the root cause? Why do we need to find that when an accident happens? Well, it's better to be safe than sorry, right? We don't want accidents. We don't want losses. We don't want to lose money on our projects. We don't want things to happen over and over again. We don't want people getting hurt and having damage to property and things like that. And that's why if we find the root cause, if we find the reason why an accident happens, we can learn to prevent that from happening again and avoid those hardships. Okay. There's many ways to do root cause analysis. There's several techniques of that, and some of the most simplest ones just involve asking some simple questions of why and how things happen. But it's like with an onion. Sometimes you don't know what an onion's like until you start to peel the layers back. You may buy an onion at the store, and until you open it up and start cutting into it and get through each of those layers, you may not know how strong of an onion it is, or how bitter or sweet that it is. And so it's like that with a root cause analysis. You got to go layer by layer. You got to keep asking questions, sticking to facts, getting to the real reason, the real root cause of why an accident happens. And so that's what we want to look for when we do these. So we don't want to stop until we find that root cause. Like I said, sometimes people fall short. They don't ask enough questions. Maybe they jump to conclusions and assume they know why something happens. They're not asking, who and what and how enough to get to that real root cause. So make sure we continue doing that until we find the real reason. Sometimes we just get to operator error. They'll find that there was a car accident, and they'll say that the driver of the car, it was their fault, and they made the mistake, and this is what they did. When in reality, there could be other things that lead to the accident as well. Maybe there's not enough training. Maybe there's not policy and procedure in place. Maybe there's not enough adequate supervision or management support or tools and equipment for the job. There's a lot of different reasons that could cause an accident, not just the person that's involved in the accident itself. So we want to look for that. We want to ask those questions and keep going until we get to that root cause. So things you might want to look for. Here's some questions you might ask. when you hear of an accident, when somebody calls you and tells you about it, or when you're charged with looking into it, here's some things you might consider. Are procedures available? Is there a policy and procedure, standard operating procedure in your workplace? Are they available? Do people know about them? Have employees been trained? Is the training sufficient? Was the supervision on the project adequate? Was it sufficient there? Are there any management deficiencies? Do we have the right tools and equipment for the job? Those are questions that we can ask as we go through, and really, you know, what can we do to prevent an accident from happening? That's another thing we can look at. So I've got a few examples here I'm going to share with you today. These are things that come from accident investigations that we've seen that were sent in with the TAP applications, and there's no names on these, so they're totally anonymous, but they do come from our members around the state, and we have 4 scenarios that we're going to look at. The first one is a lifting injury with a boulder. We'll look at an employee that was injured there from lifting. There was an employee that cut his hand with a crowbar. There was a near miss with the air compressor hose, and damage to the back of a truck. So we'll look at each one of these, and we'll talk about some good things and bad things about these incident investigations so we can see. And really the goal is so that we can learn from them and see what's going on and how to improve there. So here's the first one. We have a description at the top. It says he was working in a trench fixing a water leak, and he tried to move a rock, which is a boulder, and it ended up injuring his lower back from doing that. So in this form, you can see they checked off a couple of conditions and things that they found were factors that led to the root cause and led to the accident there. So conditions, they had restricted motion. Looking down below, lifting. Yeah, it's a tight area. It's tight work. As far as the goes, they identified the boulder, and that boulder is not necessarily the root cause. Just because there's a boulder or a rock or something in the workplace does not mean that that's actually what caused the accident. We could ask questions like, did he have enough room to work? Was there somebody else there to help lift? Did he have tools and equipment available to make it easier or safer on him? Were there other conditions that led to hurting his back that way? Just simply identifying the boulder is not necessarily a root cause. For a root cause, we would need a description of what a deficiency was, and a lot of times this ties right back to management, the supervision, providing the tools and equipment, the way things are done. There's a lot of other reasons, not just because there's a boulder on the site that causes the accident. So there's something we can learn from on that first one. Here's the next one. We had an employee that was using a crowbar, and it slipped and cut the employee's left hand on their palm area. Okay, so we can look at this as well. We see conditions that were identified. There were slippery conditions, and they identified, as far as management, there were rules that were not enforced, and so those are factors that contributed to it. For a description, it also says that the tool slipped and cut the hand. And then we get down to the root cause. The root cause section says that it was discussed in a safety training meeting. Instruction was given about wearing gloves, eye protection, and other items for protection. So those are really good things. Those are really good things to correct a hazard and the problem, but they're not necessarily a root cause. So in this case, they've actually identified what to correct and what a solution is, but they haven't identified the reason that this employee actually cut their hand on the crowbar. Maybe we could look at the management factor where they had rules not enforced. We could ask why. Well, why were the rules not enforced? Is there lack of training? Is there lack of enforcement? Slippery conditions, what were they like? How was it in the work area? There's a lot of other questions we could get to a root cause why, but this didn't actually identify the root cause in this scenario here. So there's another example. Here's the next one. While blowing out lines for the winter, the air compressor hose came off and whipped around. No one was near it, but it was an issue and could have been a problem. And definitely could have been a problem with the hose, whipping around in the room with some pressure in it. But let's look at this now. Look at the things they identified here. They have using defective equipment. They have improper tool or equipment used, defective tools, equipment, and materials, and they have hazards not identified. Those are their factors. But what's the root cause? The root cause they have below says material of the fittings was not sufficient for the operating pressure of the line. Okay, so that's a really good thing. They found something that they can correct. They found a deficiency that the material of the fittings is not the right kind. And so there's a really good thing there. But is that the root cause? Is that the root cause of the accident? If we ask, why was that material not the right kind, or why was it allowed to be there? Why was it put in that place in the first place? We can ask those questions and go just a little step farther, and maybe there's other things that we can find a root cause why an accident happens. Okay. And here's the last one here. We had a vehicle. This is some vehicle damage. There was a truck where they had a dent on the tailgate, and it says in the second line below, it says, "I hooked up the chains, but not the coupler." And so the trailer popped up and put a dent in the truck. And so we know that the trailer coupler was not attached to that ball and that hitch there, and it popped up and caused the damage on the tailgate. So they did some really good things here. They have it in categories where it says, why did it happen? They've got several broad categories: environment, design, system, procedure, human behavior. Those are good. And they did identify that it was a system and a procedure problem why that accident happened. So that's good. We could ask ourselves, okay, so what's the root cause here? Is it that the system wasn't followed? Is it that the procedure is not in place? You can see on the right side where it says trailer checklist and circle of safety. Those are some good practices. Those are things to have a procedure and a practice in place. But we don't know if they were being used. We don't know if that's what needs to be done in the future. And it doesn't quite identify those details of the root cause. And so you can see as we've gone through these today, there's some good things that come out of them, and you may have several really good solutions that come out of an investigation. You might find things to really improve on, but make sure you're really identifying what that real root cause is. What's that underlying reason? What's that initiating event that causes the accident to follow? And that's what we want to look for as we do the root cause analysis there. So again, why do we want to do this? Because we want to know the answer. We want to have good answers. And if we want better answers, we need to ask better questions. Make sure we're asking why and how and what can we do differently, and really driving down asking those questions to get the answers that you're looking for so we can prevent the accident and not go through it again. I like this picture here, the accident weed. Sometimes when you look at a plant or you look at a flower, all you see is what's above ground. You don't see the root system that's below. You don't see what's causing that flower or that plant to really grow. And it's the same way with root cause analysis. You may see on the surface, you may see hazardous conditions in the workplace. You may see hazardous practices, whether it's not reporting things or defective tools or equipment failures. You may see things like that happen, but what is it that's really causing those things to happen in the workplace? You look down at the roots on this picture here, and you see there's a lot of other things involved. There's poor work procedures, lack of supervision, rules not enforced, lack of training, lack of leadership. Those are root cause categories that we want to look at and identify those problems that could be in the workplace. Okay, it's not necessarily just the end result and the things that you see. So the best thing to do is identify the categories that root causes could fall into. And here's a listing of some of those. Like I say, a lot of times it ties right to management and supervision. Sometimes there's not enough support, there's not enough direction or training. It could be not enough personnel, not having the right tools and equipment. But sometimes that ties right back to management and not making sure that the projects are going and planned out as they need to. It could be a training and competency issue. Maybe the employees don't have the training or the experience or know how to do things safely. It could be adherence to standards. Maybe there's no standard policy or procedure in place to follow. Maybe the employees don't know, or maybe it hasn't been put into place. Maybe they're not available. Communication breakdowns. This can also lead to accidents. Tools and equipment, not having the right tools or enough equipment or the right kind can lead to accidents. And so we can categorize those things and see, what is the root cause? What is our deficiency here in our organization that's causing these accidents to happen? We can look at that. One of the last things, and it's very rarely this happens, but it could be a factor out of our control. And typically that's less than 1% of all accidents is going to be a factor out of our control. Think about an earthquake. We can't do anything about an earthquake. It happens. We have no control over when and if an earthquake happens, and that would be something out of our control. But usually workplace accidents, property damage, incidents like that in the workplace, those are usually something controllable. They're usually something that's going on where there's a deficiency or somebody has made, an error in judgment or, lacking things that they need to do it safely. And so we want to look at that in our accidents, make sure we get to that root cause. So when you do get to the root cause, what do you do about it? Well, it's time to take action on it, right? Make sure you implement a corrective action. You want one solution to go with every root cause that you identify, but we want to make sure that we're addressing the root cause, not just those symptoms and things that we see on the surface. We want to see what's really causing that accident to happen in our organization. Make sure we follow through on those things. And I really like this question here. We can ask this in any incident investigation we do. Ask this question: what can we do to prevent this from happening again? What is that main thing that we can change? What is it that's that initiating event, like that red domino? What's causing that thing to go on and continue? What can we change to make it better and prevent that accident? Finishing up with a quote: those who do not learn from their mistakes are bound to repeat them. And I think that's a story through all of our life. As we go through our life, we make mistakes, we slip, we fall, sometimes we stumble, and we get back up, and we don't want to do that again. Sometimes we learn the hard way. Let's not make those mistakes over and over again. Let's learn from the first mistake, improve things, make the changes that we need to, and not go through the hardships. And root cause analysis, getting to the root cause and finding that root, is really what helps you so you don't go through those same hardships again. So to summarize, let's get to the root cause. Let's remember to ask why. When an accident happens, think about it. Why did that happen? What can we do to improve? What are the conditions? Find out why by just asking those questions. Identify the root cause. Identify a corrective action and solutions for each root cause, and let's learn not to make the same mistake twice. It's a lot easier if you just learn it right the first time. So with that, I'll see if there's any questions. And Jason, do you have any questions over there?
Nobody's typed any questions in yet, so you can go ahead and type those in the chat box or the Q&A box, and then we'll get those to Brent so we can answer those. And I think my point on this is just like your toddler, how they act. They say, why? That's what we need to ask when it comes to this. Looking for the root causes. Just keep asking why until we get down to that. Till we get to something that really hurts. That's where we can really make some fundamental changes. It's always easy to say operator error or point to something that a person has. Hey, this person messed up there. But why did they do that? Sometimes people will do things maliciously. They'll take an action, but many times it's because of something that in our system that has allowed that to take place. So we have a question here. How do we get samples of incident reports to use? Brett?
We have some sample forms we can send out to you, and you can send us an email, or we can send it out with the reminder about this webinar. We can send some copies there.
Yeah, we'll blast it out as the webinar recording is available on our website. We'll blast those sample reports out to you. Let's see. Looks like we got a question. If I can read it, can we get a copy of the presentation?
Yeah, we can do that as well. We can send a PDF copy as well with that.
Awesome. Okay. It looks like that's all the questions we've got. Brent or Doug, did you have anything to add?
Just kind of on the vein of what you said, Jason, when we look at how to fix problems, how to prevent future incidents, you got to identify what you have control over. And that's part of what a root cause analysis is. It's getting down to something that you can control, something that you have control of, that we can change. As long as we identify the cause as being something that's out of our control, that's in somebody else's wheelhouse, we're not empowering ourselves, and we really need to empower ourselves by drilling this down till we get to something that we actually have control over.
Great. Hey, Gary has a great question that actually could be a whole webinar in and of itself. He says, how do you determine when a task requires a written set of procedures and when common sense guides what to do? Ooh, that's a great question.
That is a great question.
Nobody wants to answer it, apparently.
Depends on how many procedures
complexity and
have written out.
How involved it is, I would say. Yeah, there could be a lot of variation on that one.
Yeah, it really, I think, comes down to the hazard associated with the task. we look at, I spent a fairly significant amount of time working in some highly hazardous industries dealing with chemical processes, and when we have something that the consequences are great enough, you know, you think of any situation where failure to handle the process or fail to appropriately execute the task could lead to serious injury or death or major loss. You know, you think of the space industry, you think of air travel. Those are pretty obvious examples. Well, I want that pilot, when I go on a trip, to have a set checklist, a set procedure on how the pilot does his or her job to get me safely from one place to another. And that's kind of the starting point. Is look at the overall risk of your operation. What's what's the consequence if we fail to do this appropriately? If it's throwing some trash in the trash can, you know, maybe the consequences are not that great if I miss the trash can or I put it in the wrong trash can. But it may be something like driving. Is there a serious consequence if we mess up when we're out plowing snow, pushing snow, things like that? Yeah, it probably is a pretty serious consequence if we mess up, and maybe we look at a procedure for those types of activities. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I think it's right. If it leads to something severe or an accident or, you know, something that's happened over and over again, if you're having something repeat, you may want to have a procedure.
Yeah. And then the other side of it, of course, is sometimes there's a regulatory requirement that tells us we have to have a procedure on that, and so we identify those as well. So awesome, great question. I kind of like that one for the topic of a webinar sometimes. So remind me, guys, when we're talking about topics. Well, great. Thanks everybody for attending. Good group today. I appreciate it. We're going to be back in just in less than a half hour to log on and get ready for cybersecurity. So if you haven't signed up for that, make sure you send me an email right now to jason@utahtrust.gov, and I will send you a link that will get you directly in. Because if you just sign up at this point, you won't have your login credentials back in time. So go ahead and send me an email, and I will send you that link out. Thanks, everybody. Have an awesome day. Trying to find my buttons. They keep moving my buttons.